Hello, hello. Got an announcement. So next Saturday, November 30th, 2024 at 9 a.m., that's Mountain Standard Time, I will be doing a live AMA on Instagram. That's an Ask Me Anything about the Shaper Origin. All right, let's get going. Penrose triangle. It's a really cool optical illusion. We're going to use two different colors of wood for each leg of the triangle, so it'll look like part of it is shaded, and then the adjacent side or edge will be a different color. So we need 7 colors. Seventh color is the background, right? So that's the background. That'll be one leg, kind of a dark and light. That'll be the other leg. And here I planned on using this darker area and this lighter area for one of the legs, okay? Okay, so for the work surface, here I have 2 layers of 1/8 inch MDF. In between the 2 layers, or you could even put it underneath, I use some of the same thickness veneer to raise it up slightly. And the reason for that, here I have 1/4 inch, and with this on top, now we have this surface and this part dead flush, right? Make sure you clamp both of them, everything down. You don't want anything to move. But you can see, once we put this in place, everything is one even playing field. Krylon Easy Tack. I love this stuff. You can probably get it online. I get this at Hobby Lobby, but we can't use double stick tape to hold these fragile veneers. And this stuff, you'll notice we're only going to spray the wasteboard. You don't need to spray both sides. We're not going to treat it like contact cement. We want easy tack, right? It needs to be removable. The stuff goes everywhere, so make sure you shield your tape and your machine. And these tips, they tend to clog. I sell these little cans off my website. They have a little strainer basket. I just keep acetone or lacquer thinner in there. And I always have a fresh one that's going to be a straight shooter, yeah? Also excellent for cleaning your small router bits. Simply let them soak. Use a brass brush. Awesome. Another item that you should have is a metal roller. Could be a wooden wallpaper roller, but these metal ones work really well. So the grain's running a little crooked on this particular piece of veneer. I'm going to mark it in line with the grain. And now I can align those pencil marks parallel with the domino tape or that part of the work area. Just makes it easier to align the grain later. And just like that, roll the veneer down really well. All right, so on the right side of the Shaper Origin screen, you can see the scan button. We can hit scan, then we're going to go to new scan there on the left, and we're just going to scan all these markers, all these dominoes. So we're just going to move the machine left and right, and notice where the light is hottest. That's the hot spot, or what Shaper Origin calls the sweet spot. I borrowed this image from one of their videos. Now we use that sweet spot to scan all the tape, overlapping, kind of like painting. And notice those black markers, those are dead. They're either cut or scratched. You need to be able to see the blue ones. Those are what you're after. So since the tape is not exactly cheap, I cut between the markers rather than tearing it. Now here you'll notice that I'm capturing the image of those veneers that we laid down. Here you can see my hand and 2 adjacent edges of that one piece of veneer. So yeah, many times it's beneficial to capture not only the tape, but the image of the piece that you're working with. And we can just hit the green button to finish scan and let it do its thing. Okay, here's a fantastic representation. What you see, the shaper tape or the dominoes, and what Origin measures. So it essentially triangulates, utilizing all those markers. So once you've scanned, Shaper Origin knows precisely where it's at in a 2D space. So here I did get a shot. You want to just make sure and scan your tape and then scan, so your image of your veneers show up. The edges of the veneer, the grain, all of that comes in handy later. So you may have noticed I didn't do a grid. right? Don't really need a grid because I'm going to place my file right on top of the grain and move it where it looks best. Okay, I can grab the file. Let me enlarge that a little. Now, notice I can twist the machine and I can place that exactly where I want. That's the beauty of scanning your workpieces. All right, so this top file, I want that to be the darker grain. So I can move the shaper origin around and find some dark grain, line it up where the grain is somewhat parallel, and boom, we can either hit the green button or this place icon. Now, this bottom image or file, I want it to be in some lighter grain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. See this little copy. Once that file highlights, you can hit the copy button. Do the same thing, and I can move that bottom file where I want. Can put it right in there. Yeah, something like that. That looks good. So now you see there's 4 files there, but we're only going to use the 2 in the middle, right? Because one in the dark grain, one in the light grain. How awesome is that? Now at the right of the screen, we go to cut mode. And then on the left side of the screen, we'll go through these kind of like a checklist starting at the top. Our depth is going to be 28 thousandths. This veneer is about 22 thousandths, so we're plenty deep. We need to be on the outside. The cut path will be on the outside of this particular file. 0 offset is fine for now. I have a 0.031 size bit. That's a 1/32 bit. I'll leave a link in the description on where I get those. Then, of course, with the Z-Touch, we let that automatically do its job. We're ready to roll. Okay, with the vacuum on and the machine running, we tap that green button twice, kind of 2 quick taps. It'll go down and stay in automatic, auto lock. Auto lock, that's what it is. Now, some of you, many of you, most of you, I don't know, are probably already familiar with this. You can fast forward or whatever. Some people are just starting out, and this is how the machine works. In auto lock, we just need to keep that white dot that's on the toolpath within that corrective range of that green circle, and it'll do the rest. So if I move even a little bit sideways, as long as I'm in that corrective range of the green circle, I'm fine. And you'll notice that I'm moving the machine, staying within range, and when I get to a corner, I stop. And I just let the machine go around those corners. It'll do a way better job than me trying to follow a corner. Then once I'm out of the corner, I can just continue as normal. One thing I didn't touch on when we were in cut mode is the speed. So you'll have 2 speeds. You have the plunge speed, how fast the bit goes down before it starts cutting, and your auto speed. And that is the rate at which your cutter moves in the XY plane whilst in auto mode, which means with a small bit like a 1/32, you should turn that down. It's set at a default of 10. You could drop it down to 8 or 9. The plunge speed seems to be fine at the default of 10. And before I forget, I thought I would show you an image of that 1/32 bit. I get these from Timo, straight off of Amazon. They're relatively cheap, maybe around $11 or something. Link in the description. When you finish making your cut, you hit the button on the left with your thumb, the orange button. Spindle retracts, and boom, you have all your pieces. That is so cool. All right, a couple more inexpensive tools that you really should have. These are painter spatulas. I love this little dude. It is super thin, and these will enable you to sneak under that thin commercial veneer. Incidentally, just to clarify, this is raw veneer, so it's veneer both sides. It is not paper-backed. I would recommend not using paperback. The paperback, like a 10 mil paperback, is going to be, 10 thousandths of paper. Then the rest is veneer. So it is really, really thin veneer. This is a little bit thicker, although very thin at 1/42 of an inch or 23 thousandths, somewhere in there, or about 0.6 millimeter. Thin, but still very workable. I do have a variety of veneer packs available off my website. Yeah, man, that's going to be cool. All right, on the drawing, do you see these little splines on the corners? I was going to make a file, but I forgot. But we can do this. We can create these right on board the Shaper Origin screen by creating a rectangle. And I want the grain to be cross grain, and I'm going to angle it. So when we place the file, we will twist it slightly to angle that grain. All right, to create those small rectangles, first we go back to design mode, and then we go to create, punch in rectangle, and we can choose the width, 0.125, 1/8 inch. That will mimic a table saw blade kerf. The height, we can do anything. We just make it plenty long. 1 inch will be plenty long. And notice how I can move the machine to orient the grain exactly how I want. Cool feature about the Shaper Origin is these blue marks. These are previous cut paths. So we want to avoid those. Those could have cuts right there. And incidentally, I can utilize this angle here and just go perpendicular to it. And that's going to give me my 60 degrees with that cross grain or whatever that angle is. 30 degrees, 60 degrees, depends on how you look at it. Back to cut mode. Make sure you're on the outside of that. Boom, outside. There we go. And we will do that for all three of those splines in the species that you need. To make more of those or whatever file you want to copy, simply go to design mode again, hit the copy button. There we go, copy mode. See, it produced another one, and then I can drag that and place it on the veneer of choice and at the appropriate angle or whatever I need it. Super easy. Yeah, just like that. I love it. All right, this little mineral mark or knot or whatever it is, I don't want that to end up in some weird place. So I can go back to scan mode. You can see I can just go to add to scan. And even though I already scanned this, my goal here is to scan this new piece of veneer. And it's going to capture an image of not only the outline of that veneer, it'll also show me that little knot. It's not a knot. It's a mineral deposit. And boom, there it is. That's kind of cool, right? I love that feature. Okay, back to import. We'll grab that file. Now this is going to be the background or the cavity pocket, but we need to save that interior triangle. And sometimes you'll notice when you go into cut mode, it wants to be online. That would be like for engraving with a V-bit. That's probably because I didn't set up a proper cut path in Shaper Studio, but that's another topic. So here, the file is that outer ring of the triangle, not that inner triangle. I'll talk about inside and outside cuts here in a bit. So the outer ring or outer part of the triangle, we want to be on the inside of that because we're cutting a cavity or a pocket. Just make sure that you're on the right side. So just keep in mind the green line is your scanned outline or reference of the file, and the dotted line is the exact cut path. So you can be online, inside, or outside. And the moving dotted line also indicates the direction that you need to move the machine. Here I wanted to point out that vulnerable tip where my scalpel is, that's going to be all cross grain, so be careful. So when I dry assembled this, I noticed there was a gap around the triangle. Sure, you could split the difference, but you can see a pretty big gap. So I'm going to do an offset on the Shaper Origin, cut a new piece, ensure the grain won't match, but I think that'll be less noticeable than gaps around that inner triangle. Back at the Shaper Origin, and I'm just going to cut this little area here, but notice I have a piece, just some scrap, to support the Shaper Origin. Always make sure that it's sitting on one flat plane. Now, I didn't show it, but I could see my original cut path for that triangle in my wasteboard, so I just put the new veneer right in that spot, and I can just cut again. We're going to go to cut mode. Depth was not quite deep enough last time. I'm going to add a couple of thou. We'll go 33 thousandths deep. And here's where we can add a little offset. So I could probably add 5 thou. If you don't understand negative or positive offsets, just make it something big to start without cutting, like a big difference, and you'll see it. Here, I went 100 thousandths, and you could see that it was way over the line. Let me show you what I mean real quick. We'll go negative 100 thou. You can see that's way inside the cut path. It would make that piece way too small. So yeah, we're going to add 5 thou positive and make that piece just a little bit bigger. So just exaggerate it and it'll be clear to you. I have this little MDF block with 180 grit. Right now the piece is flat against the table, so it's vertical. I will tilt it slightly, put the piece of veneer against it, and I can just go back and forth, and I know I'm not going to misshape that edge. I'm just going to put a slight, very slight back bevel, and that'll also remove any burrs. Sure, these could have been made as a file, but I thought it's just easy to cut those angles. We can make sure they line up with the edge, and you don't have to cut it all at once, right? You can sneak up on it. All right, that's looking good. Now, something we can do to make this look really dynamic is these areas here. You would think that would be kind of, shaded. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to scorch that with some hot sand. Hot sand, let me show you. What I have here is an inexpensive electric hot plate, I guess. I've got a pan full of sand. We're going to take a sample. We're going to see how quickly this scorches. It doesn't take much once that thing is heated up. And it's interesting, different species, they, different scorch times. So yeah, it's always a good idea to grab a snack. Grab a scrap and do a test run. I'm hungry. That could use them a little bit more, but it's easy to go too much. That's a lot better. Here we go, same species. The real piece is a little bit smaller. And just like that, I almost went too much. It's a fine art in and of itself, sand shading. But man, it adds so much depth, dynamic to your motifs. I believe we're ready. Now, rather than trying to add glue to each individual piece and slip it in place, let's just tape everything right across the front on the top side. This is the easiest way to do these. It's not how I do marquetry, but this is not really marquetry, and this works really well. We're just going to tape everything in place. Oh, be sure to dust off all that sand. Don't learn the hard way like I did. Here's that cool little roller again. Make sure everything seats and is flat, flush, of course. Flip it over to the back side. We're going to squeegee some glue into all those little cracks, seams, joints. On really large motifs like that barn door I did, I went with a negative 1 thou offset on all the pieces just to give myself a little bit of slack. On this, we didn't do any offset and the pieces almost had gaps, so it really depends on what you're working on. We'll add some wax paper and a cowl. Wait about an hour, pull those loose, and we'll see how we did. Yeah, of course, be careful pulling the tape. You can rip pieces right out, so just take your time. 1/4 inch MDF makes a really great substrate. Something this small could be framed, or it could be a lid for a box. You could go thicker, maybe 1/2 inch or 3/8, 9mm, 12mm, 6mm, somewhere in there. We're going to want to make sure we get all the dust off. And I'm scuffing everything with 80 grit. I'm using some of this Grit Grip double-sided sandpaper. I love this stuff. All right, we're going to cut this guy to size. Of course, my goal is to basically center in this 8x8, and I might cut it down later, but I want to get it close to center for now, or close to center to start. As I was scuffing this, I noticed this one little area didn't quite glue. Won't matter whatsoever. These little dudes are awesome, cheap, free, basically, right? I just stack a bunch of them together, cut little notches at the table saw. Perfect disposable glue spreaders. I made a YouTube video showing how I do that. Might be under quick tips, or I really don't remember, but super easy to make. The wax paper is really important in case you get glue. Well, not in case. You will get bleed through, especially on the motif side. Those little gaps, glue will come through. It'll be stuck to your caul. That will not make you happy. So add some wax paper, tape everything in place, clamp it, be happy. Well, immediately I wasn't happy with those clamps not quite reaching all the way, so I cut another caul for the bottom instead of using my table. This will be better. All right, whilst that is drying, we'll cut some strips. I'm going to show you an easy way to put not a frame, but a border. Quick, easy, beautiful, effective, all that. And yeah, sure, vacuum bags are an ideal way to clamp something up like this, but hey, not everybody has a vacuum bag, so I thought I'd share this method. I may have been a little careless, so it kind of twisted, but no big shake. We're going to make everything straight. Typically, I would use my sliding table saw, which also has a scoring blade, but I wanted to show you how to use a regular table saw to create this nice and straight and also make a scoring cut without a scoring blade. So all we need is some double stick tape, a board that's parallel. We can line that up with the bottom leg of that Penrose triangle. Tap it down. Let's go make a cut. You can see how this works to make a cut parallel with that bottom leg of the triangle. And since we're cutting with the grain, we don't need a scoring cut. We can just make a regular cut. All right, that's nice and clean. We'll pop that cleat off. And I need to make a 90-degree cut, but I let my neighbor borrow my miter gauge. So I've got this block of wood, has a 90-degree corner. That'll work. To start, I'm just making a trim cut adjacent to that first cut I made. Yes, this is cross grain. It might chip a little on the bottom. I'm not worried about that just yet. There are a lot of ways to do this. You could use a crosscut sled. Mine is buried somewhere since I have a sliding table saw, but lots of ways to do this. And as I'm always preaching, if you don't like what you see me or anyone doing, don't do it. The key is for you to be comfortable and safe. Here I'm just gauging to cut the other side and take off the minimal amount. All right, check this out. We're going to add a piece of tape. So that's like 4/1000ths, right? We're going to run that opposite, that clean cut, might be chipped on the bottom, against the fence. We're going to drop the blade down. We're going to make a scoring cut. All right, let's give this a go. We'll run that through just like normal, producing a nice, clean scoring cut. Cross grain, right? Now we can remove the tape. Then we'll raise the blade, make a cut again. Essentially, that board has shifted over 4/1000ths toward the fence, reducing or eliminating the chance of splintering the bottom of that board. Very effective. Here I've added the tape back. We can move the fence and cut again to center the motif on the panel. Again, we drop the blade, make another scoring cut. Bam. Not exactly efficient if you had a bunch of parts. If that was the case, then yeah, get a sliding table saw with a scoring blade. But one or two, this works really well, and that little 4,000th step is negligible. And then finally, we can make that last rip cut with the grain. Awesome. I've been using this Boss Dog wood glue. I really like it. It comes in clear, goes on white, dries clear, then a brown and a medium. The nozzles are perfect. You can control the flow. When I cut these strips, I made sure to note one edge or one face was hand planed. So that hand planed clean surface will go against the panel edge. And I've shown this many times before. Take our tape, we twist it 90 degrees, and boom, you have an instant tab. Those tabs, they come in super handy later. So these first two strips, I cut them slightly long, glue those in place, and we'll let that dry a bit. Now, this is not necessary for me, but this stock is pretty thin, a little over 1/4 inch. And of course, the goal is to get those protruding little sections of the trim dead flush and flat, square to that panel edge. So you could use a hand plane, sand block. These are little cheaters, training wheels, but lots of ways to do this. Remove any dust if there is some and add the other strips. And I would leave those long, and I'll show you why. And back at the table saw, again, I would probably use my slider for this, but you can see that these are protruding, different lengths, no big shake. We're going to get a block that's thicker than the longest protruding one. I've added a couple of chamfers, just in case there's any glue in those corners. That back end will probably blow out, so we're going to back that up with a little walnut strip, or you can make a cut, flip it. Here I can double check the distance, and let's make the cut. This is a nice fresh blade, and notice I have a zero clearance insert. Beautiful. Now we could use that block again, or we can move the fence over. Either way. That looks about right. And with an accent like my buddy Phil Morley, perfect. Now to get those flush, this is an excellent way to do this. We can add a piece of tape to a sanding block. I believe this is 180 grit. The tape prevents the front edge from digging in. Very effective. And of course, if you have a narrow edge, use a narrow block, right? This wide one, very tippy. This little one, beautiful, tons of control. Or block plane. Such an essential part of any wood shop. A sharp plane or sharp chisel, just a pleasure to use. At this point, I'll go all the way around the perimeter with this sharp hand plane. Notice now I'm not going all the way to the edge. I come back from both directions. That way you don't get any spelching, I believe they call it. Blowout, chip out. Nice fine shavings, just a light cut. So your edging should protrude slightly. Of course, there's some glue. We need to get that all smooth, flush. Number of ways to do that. belt sander, right? Yeah, man. Fast, efficient. No, they're not just for rough work. If you're first starting out with a belt sander, you can put on a 320 grit and just get the feel that center of gravity, feel its balance, and learn how to use it. You're not going to do any damage with a smooth belt. I preach this all the time, and I get comments and notes from all over the world. People have incorporated belt sanders into their work, and they're super glad they did. You may not be able to see it, but there's still some little traces of glue on the back. It's not perfectly flush, real close. That way we know we're not sanding too much on that thin veneer. If you want, you could add some pencil mark. That helps us keep track. Super, super effective. Did I mention fast? And right in here, I can still see a squiggly pencil mark. Maybe hit it just a little more. I'm goosing that throttle. Notice where my sander platform is, so it's right at the tipping point. If the belt sander's pulled too far back, that rear wheel can dig in. And where I was pointing there, there's still some little pencil marks, so I know I'm not sanding too much. Then I follow up with a 180 grit on this dual action. Just taking my time, but really I don't spend a lot of time with it. That is literally it. Belt sander, one step, 180 grit. Then this dude, again, 180 grit, a used 180, and boom. That's my sanding process. Doubt me? Zoom in close on some of my work. Or better yet, come by and visit. I'll show you. Then I'm using some of this grit grip. I believe that's a 320. And I'm just lightly hitting those corners. I don't want to distort anything. Just taking off that sharp edge. I added a keyhole, just keeping it simple, simple jig. Just make sure you don't go too deep. You almost need a plunge router, but you don't have to have one. This is an oil wax combo. Vinny's Oil reached out to me on Instagram, and I'm like, sure, I'd love to try that. And it's pretty cool. It really enhances the wood, grain, color, tone, all that. And watch what it does to the front. It just comes alive. And I'll use 3 coats. And there we go. My goal for this video was to introduce you to commercial veneer. It's readily available. And then bring the Shaper Origin into the picture to create beautiful motifs. I'm anxious to see what you come up with. Leave me some questions or comments. Thanks a ton. Please remember to click, like, subscribe, share, and all that jazz. Peace.